their journey.
And I will say we attack the learning, knowledge sharing, learning, consulting, coaching with humility. We recognize that we still have a lot to learn ourselves and are constantly investing in ourselves. Obviously, as we've talked most of this podcast about that. So I'd say that there's still, but there are people who are at step one. And so it's exciting to be able to help them because we were there a few years ago. But still acknowledge that there's a lot more we want to accomplish and we will learn along the way. We can learn from people several steps ahead of us, but also our path will be different and we'll have different learnings from them that we can share with people. So
welcome to the Hassle-Free RE Podcast, a real estate podcast where we bring you stories, education, and tips for investors and real estate enthusiasts. If you're interested in investing in real estate or just want to keep a pulse on what's happening in the market, then this podcast is for you. Thanks so much for listening and tuning in. If you enjoy our show, please make sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate it. Hello, and welcome to the Hassle-Free RE Podcast. I am your host, Dave Menapace, and here's my co-host,
Kim Menapace.
And as we sit here and record this, we're actually recording from Logans Lodge, which has been our latest short-term rental investment. We actually closed on it about 9 months ago now, but we really enjoy spending holidays and vacations up here. It's a home nestled in Northwest Maine, right near Sunday River Ski Resort. And with today's date being, is it December 28th, we started to round out the year of 2022. And a lot has happened this year, both for us, our investment and short-term rental journey, but also in the industry and in the market. And we want to take the opportunity to kind of reflect on what 2022 showed us and what we're kind of seeing for 2023 and what our own personal goals are moving forward. So with that, thanks so much for joining us. And maybe we start out by just sort of reflecting where we started or where we were a year ago compared to where we are today.
About, I guess, a year ago, we only had one short-term rental, our Cape rental. And I think that we were still under contract with a different house near Sunday River. I can't remember exactly. We were under contract and I think it was just about to fall through because we knew the appraisal wasn't going to come in. And we were happy that the appraisal wasn't going to come in where we thought it would, because we were pivoting to this house in particular. But yeah, I guess I'll let you chime in a second, but fast forward to today, where now we have 2 short-term rentals, not one. We've expanded to the mountains up in New England, so to Maine. And now we have a number of co-hosting clients and kind of a backlog list of potential clients as well, and some big aspirations for ourselves and growing the number of co-hosting clients we can support and still deliver great service, and then also support for us to run those operations. Yeah, we have a lot of exciting stuff coming up in the next couple months, on that front.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Where we ended up is never where I necessarily thought we would be a year ago. So a year ago, for me personally, I was still working in the healthcare industry. I had no aspirations of leaving the healthcare industry, at least not in 2022. Really what ended up causing me to leave is I had a really great opportunity to jump in and become a full-time real estate agent. And I had a lot of momentum pulling me in that direction. And by the time our loan closed on Logans Lodge here in Maine, Kim and I put our heads together and sort of figured, there's no better time than the present. I can always go back into healthcare where I had a master's degree and was pretty well established. So we decided to bet on ourselves and take a chance on me anyways. And it doesn't come without stress working for yourself and navigating that whole space. But at the same time, Kim mentioned co-hosting. That never would have been able to even be a remote possibility if I was still spending 40 hours working at another company. So I think for me, what I saw this year is this was a year of growth. It was a year of really digging in and educating ourselves. We had always been very well educated on short-term rentals and how to manage our own short-term rentals. But this was really the year that Kim and I went and sought out education beyond, I would say, podcasts and networking. And that came in the form of different conferences that we attended throughout the year. And that was really, I would say, a big commitment to ourselves and getting educated and figuring out how can we really grow within this industry. So there's a lot to sort of unpack there, and those will all probably be their own podcasts at some point. But yeah, I never even had co-hosting on our radar. It was really, there were some opportunities when colleagues and friends of ours bought houses through me, that co-hosting opportunities presented themselves, and through the education that we had gotten at some of these conferences, and the confidence we had gotten from colleagues that we had met through networking, that really gave us what we needed to take that step. But I also think a lot has also happened in the industry too over the last year, right? What I'm seeing on the surface, anyways, is that I'm continuing to see really, really strong short-term rental investors and operators sort of banding together, learning from each other, and moving into more and more sort of untapped markets. I would say this Bethel, Maine area, it's not an untapped market for people that are local, but I am starting to see a little bit more interest from people that live outside of New England. And I think we're going to continue to see that. I'm definitely starting to see this wider and wider gap from the mom and pop, sort of like where we started. We were the mom and pop type of shop where we sort of threw it on Airbnb and found success and then learned and iterated year after year, to now having a lot sort of more steeper competition and hills to climb and battles to face against people that are really experienced. But why don't I pause there? Because there's a lot to get into with the whole industry thing. What have you kind of seen over the last year?
A couple comments on where you were recapping with your career and your journey and the conferences you introduced me to. I'd say that there's a push and a pull with, I think, anytime you're leaving a job, and I think seeing the antithesis of how unhappy you were in your current healthcare job that you were happy with for a while, and you even got a master's degree.
Yeah.
And then I think that you also benefited from meeting Adrian and Harley out of your Chattanooga investments.
Yeah.
And she was actually the one who asked if you were going to the conference in June for the STO North conference.
Forgot
And
about that.
then that's how you booked that, stayed in an Airbnb with a bunch of people that you've never met before in person, came back asking me crazy questions like, what's the number that you would want us to be able to make for revenue every month? And I think it's hard to have one partner go through those mindset shifts and exercises and someone else not to. So I had a little bit of FOMO, and that's when you asked if we wanted to go to the September more smaller intimate conference in Miami. I jumped on it. And I definitely had these wave of emotions of, oh, should we be spending this money? Dave's income's a little bit more variable now. And I feel like I go through that, I've been through that a lot this year. Stepping out of my comfort zone, and I'm always the like security person with our finances and stuff. So I think that was a big growth year for me in pushing out of my comfort zone and being a little bit less scared and just go with the flow, and that stuff being smart and calculated where I can control it, but also taking leaps of faith where we can, and also listening to where your head was at and your heart was at too, I think was really important. So those were my comments from that. I think also there's a shift in the industry, like you said, with people being able to facilitate hosting at a much higher caliber. But I also think COVID is just going to be interesting with companies shifting to more flexible remote options. Even my company that was strict against work from home prior to the pandemic is now allowing 3 days work from home a week, which is huge. So I think that we saw this at the Cape, where the shoulder seasons and weekday bookings and occupancy was just higher because people could work from the beach, they could work from the mountains. I think you still have Wi-Fi issues and stuff here. Starlink's been pretty good up in here, but I think that with the recession looming or here, but also this increased flexibility, it'll just be a really interesting year next year to see where everything shakes out. We hear on boards and other community sites that bookings overall are down or revenues down a bit. But I think that it's not so dire that I think there's any reason to panic, but it'll be really interesting to see where the dust settles, given the macroeconomic environment right now, and then also the shift in people's flexibility with COVID and the aftermath that it's left in the workforce forever.
Yeah, and I think we should dig into that because I think that with the shifts that we're seeing in the industry specifically, I think that you really have to adjust your strategy when buying a short-term rental, right? I know for us, I can kind of go through what our strategy has been and, what it would look like for the foreseeable future if the right property pops up. Um, when we bought our Logan's Lodge, this short-term rental, interest rates were still really low. I think we secured 3.8%, and we
Sure.
closed on this house in March of 2022. We did find it off market, which took a little bit of effort, but we also just got really lucky. And we were confident putting 10% down because we knew what the value of the house would be after making a few pretty inexpensive updates. But, my suggestion to people and I think for a long time, a house like this, people would sort of throw 50K at it, they'd buy it, and then they'd get a little bit of new furniture in it and then just kind of go for it and not have any sort of reserves or line of credit to be able to tap into. What I think is really important, and this is jumping ahead a bit, but really looking at this industry and looking forward to 2023, I think, putting 10% down is still totally fine. But I think that you need to have a much deeper pocket when it comes to reserves, and you cannot half ass it when it comes to thinking if investment property is your goal and that's your primary objective in getting a return on your investment, then I really think that you need to take a real hard look at what the competition around you is providing, and you have to start having the mindset that you're going to exceed that. In the Cape, it can be as simple as just providing sheets for your guests. It's not super common for some of the more affordable cottages that people rent. We're providing sheets now, right? So it doesn't have to be that you're creating game rooms and saunas and heated driveways and all these sorts of things. It doesn't, mini golf courses on your property, which I've seen, but you really just have to be smart and think about how can I provide the very best guest experience, and that does take money. So I think that looking at the amenities that you're providing and the experience that you want to deliver, if your goal is to have it purely as an investment property. I think that the other thing is, there's lots and lots and lots of people that I saw in 2022. They'd sort of do what I like an Airbnb flip, right? They would buy a home that would be an existing amazing vacation home. They would get it decked out with really, really good design. They'd get it operational with at least really good top line revenue. And by that, I mean, top line is that gross that you receive. It is not the bottom line that you take home, but they'll make the numbers look really good. And then they'll go and they'll sell it at a premium. And the challenge you have there as a buyer, if you play that game, is that you're only giving yourself one singular exit strategy. And that singular exit strategy is to continue to short term rental it. And if you're not as good as that other operator, or you don't have an experienced co host or property manager, you're going to be losing money. You are. you really need to always make sure that you're sticking to fundamentals and giving yourself 2 exit strategies at least. So that second exit strategy is, if you need to, you wanna be able to sell that property, right? And you don't wanna have to sell it to an investor to make your money back. You wanna be able to sell it to somebody that just wants a vacation home or an investor. You wanna have options there. So I'm seeing it more and more. Just be super careful. If the seller has is trying to sell the home within a year and it's clear that they put a lot of time, effort, and energy into getting it where it is, work with somebody that knows short-term rentals in the area. So
I'd say a quick add-on to that comment is knowing the markets and that your variable costs that affect your bottom line can be pretty substantial. I think that we knew that coming into a mountain market, but it has been crazy exorbitant amounts of money, which were prepared for and were able to handle. But for perspective, we had a plow person who was, I think, just a little bit more casual about how they handled this property prior to us owning it. And that didn't work for us because we want people very prompt, very communicative and on top of that. So we switched plow companies and we had a big storm last week. Our plow guys had to come back multiple times. They also shovel for us around where the trash barrels are, et cetera. It was $750 for the last like 2 weeks, just for the plowing and the shoveling and stuff. So we don't expect those types of storms often, but even, our projections being conservative and calculating all of those things, there's still surprises, even within a particular category you were expecting, but then outside of that category too, like water issues we've talked about on prior podcasts.
yeah.
So I'd say that something that as we were just looking at a deal this week, I was picking apart that because I'm always looking at that, the expense tracking and the bottom line and saying, if someone's buying something cash and plans to hold it for X number of years, then it can make sense. But if you're someone who's like us putting 10, 20% down, it's just, I'd be extra cautious and very, cutting edge on your analysis there, because what might be a smaller mistake in a different market environment could be a big mistake and really screw you over in this market.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, the big takeaway on this topic as it relates to what to consider in 2023 when borrowing money is going to continue to be expensive is to have a padded reserve. Just have a really padded reserve. And if you don't have one, I would just be really careful. Maybe instead of buying that house on your own, team up with a partner so you just have, you have more cash available to you, or consider getting a second job, or just there's a million ways to make money. That's not the point of this show today, but it's have the cash or at least the credit available to you if you need to tap into it. And we can talk about that later. And if anyone has any questions on how to find credit, you can always reach out. We're pretty good at that too.
Well, I'd add to that, I think with the it being a seller's market for a bit now, we were encouraging friends that were sitting on the sidelines thinking about buying a vacation home for the last couple of years to get a home equity line of credit on their house, just because they paid X, it's worth Y now. This is a great time to do that, especially if they're not planning to leave anytime soon.
Yeah.
So I think that that's always a good play. And then, yeah, on the interest rates, I feel like that could be its own podcast, and you know that area a lot better than I do. But something that we still hear from investors who have been in the game 30, 40 years, they say the numbers still work at 8% interest, then great. But I think there's very few deals out there that work at that number. So you have to really work hard to find those and have those still work there. So I think that's the bottom line. I said, even people buying their primary home, Dave's been working with folks that have had the mortgage payment would go up about $1,500 from what they were pre-approved at from before to what they were pre-approved at now, and at the same price point of a house. So I said, if you can still afford the monthly payment to buy that primary house, great, then do that now and then refinance out of it in a few years. But if you can't, then just sit tight, like you said, and
Right.
prepare for it, because it's just, yeah, it's a tough market right now.
Totally. So let's we'll kind of let that topic be kind of just moving in line with things that I didn't really expect this year, but gladly welcomed is that sort of for me was the power of networking. Like for me, I think that the power of having a Zoom call or a cup of coffee or even just a phone call with no real agenda, but just with other people in the space, whether they were fellow real estate agents or co-hosts, property managers, investors, and they could live anywhere in the country. I feel like for me, giving up some of my time to have those types of discussions really catapulted my career forward and probably our investment journey forward. Um, it was really interesting when I started taking money off of the table, or like, how could I make money off of this interaction or this engagement, which is a normal thought when you are um, a real estate agent, or, you work 100% off of commission. Like those are the types of thoughts you have. You're always evaluating your time and if you're using it wisely. But I think that that really helped, at least for me, which I thought was pretty cool. And again, that could be its own podcast on how to network and how to meet people and how to go about engaging other people and yourself in that. But that was a pretty cool one. How about for you?
I think for that one, I think you learned a lot in the Buffini class that your
Yeah.
agency paid for you to go through. And I think realizing that, especially for primary houses, it's very much a referral based network, especially
Yeah.
in our town and area. So I'd say both for the houses you helped transact on this year, and then also the Airbnb hosting. Like, you just
Yeah.
never know where these connections are gonna come from and play out. And if you end up working with that person, or three degrees of separation removed, it's been very cool to see how that's just expanded over time. So
Yeah, yeah. You can go next.
so was something unexpected this
Yeah,
year?
yeah. Just like what's a takeaway from this year that, January 1st of 2022 wasn't on your radar, but you're happy it happened or you learned it.
Yeah, I would say this. You're gonna laugh at this example, example that I get. So as I said, we had just our cottage in Cape Cod, Sunny Days Cottage. So taxes, everything was very simple and cookie cutter. This year, things have just exploded in complexity. Is that I'm managing 4 different QuickBooks accounts for agency stuff for each house, and then for the 5-star co-host that we started a few months ago. I should say more officially, there was some co-hosting going on before that. But I said, we've been having lots of calls with our accountant and talking through everything. And when do you have to, W-9 someone, 1099 them, et cetera. And when I realized that we have to issue, I don't know, dozen 99s, I had this kind of aha moment for myself where I said, oh, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. I feel like my upbringing and my parents had very traditional jobs, and it's like very by the book, and don't mess with taxes and complexity and things, keep everything very simple. So I had this aha moment with Dave that was a little scared at first. And I'm like, I'm not going to backtrack on all of these endeavors and businesses we're excited about and to help more people, because I'm scared that I have to issue 1099s, which is some uncharted territory. So it was just a funny complex I had in my head as I realized that. And that our single QuickBooks account has exploded into 4 with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of transactions I've categorized, recategorized, dug through your personal email to find receipts for. So that was a funny, unexpected twist I wasn't anticipating going into 2022.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I don't think I had any other sort of unexpected twists. I think like the biggest one, just sort of the biggest thing that happened this year that I just didn't have on my radar, didn't have any aspirations for, but I'm very happy that it happened, was the co-hosting.
Yeah, you came back from from the Nashville conference in June talking about co-hosting. It was almost like two parallel things fell into place there
Yeah.
where that you were talking about it. Some people led with co-hosting and didn't have any properties themselves and were looking for this as a path out of W-2 jobs or financial freedom or personal reasons. And I think co-hosting clients were just falling into our laps. I don't like that. I don't think
Yeah.
that, but really unfolding right in front of our eyes as well, where we find that so many people are interested in getting a vacation home, and they a lot of them want to rent it, but there's this apprehension about renting it. So I think that co-hosting, I wouldn't have known to call it that, or it's not like we wouldn't have gone into it if you hadn't been talking to peers and leveling up with people who are a few steps ahead of us at these conferences and meeting them and getting that idea. I think it was already kind of organically happening, but it gave us confidence, I think, to really go into this further. I don't know how many more months of people asking, will you manage my property too? When we have said, no, we only do our own. I think that those two things came together at the same time, and co-hosting was something that came onto your radar and then came onto mine in June. But also within a couple months, we had people wanting to buy and have us help manage their houses at the same time. So it was almost, I think there's people at these conferences actively trying to start co-hosting with no properties and no experience, or trying to actively grow them. And I think we're at a place where we're saying, let's be, selective and really boutique at the moment, and make sure we're with the right properties, the right owners, and that we do a good job there, get systems in place. We're already investing in a virtual assistant for 40 hours a week, which will be substantially, helpful for this. And so that will give us extra capacity to grow and provide the service. So we can still stay very much involved, but focus our energy and channel it onto things that we enjoy more, or we can bring more value to, or that are harder to train. Like we have to go figure out some strategy moves or content that is helpful for peers and people who are managing it on their own. And so I think that's something I'm very excited about. I think not a takeaway from this year, but something I'm going into 2023 with eyes wide open on is making this a business, not just a job, because right now it's very much a job for, especially
Oh
youth.
yeah. What was Christmas Eve like? Yeah.
Oh, up with houses without power. Someone canceled on their reservation. 3 other people were trying to book that reservation and figuring out logistics of that. And was there another fire drill too, I think.
The whole day. Yeah. Yeah. The
Dave
whole
was on
day
his
was a
phone a
fire.
lot.
Yeah.
And I think that, even with one property, when we had Sunny Days Cottage, we obviously weren't renting in the off season at the time. For the last few years, we've just started to, because it's better set up for being winterized, or not winterized, but better set up to enjoy in the winter and be more comfortable for people. And that's more, people are visiting family down there around the holidays, and grandma's house is only so big, so people stay down the road at our house instead. But I think that it's very much a job right now, and you hit these certain awkward breaking points where at one property it didn't make sense to have a VA. At the number we're at now, it does make sense, and that'll give us room to grow. We're going to hit another breaking point in capacity and need a second VA, a third VA, et cetera, with where
Right.
we're going. We have people steps ahead of us that have virtual assistants for for basically they cover 24/7. So there's always someone available, and then also actively working on, your backlog of tasks that are less time sensitive, but guest communication, they're the first line of defense for it, et cetera. So we'd like to get to that place so we can, again, level up, like actively train those people who will be assisting us, but then also think of it continuing to augment our systems, processes, our deal analysis, and all the other fun stuff we enjoy.
Yeah, yeah. And what was really cool about the co-hosting, because there's all these different things you can do in short-term rentals, right? You can obviously buy one and manage it. So you can be an investor. That's one way of being an operator and making money. You can do Airbnb arbitrage, which I'm not going to get too deep into, but essentially all it is you're renting a home or an apartment or something, and then you're subleasing it through Airbnb. So that's another way that a lot of people get into it. Or you can co-host, right? And what's really interesting is if you look at a lot of the more established um air like short-term rental property management companies, especially in these like older sort of, I call them blue chip vacation markets like Cape Cod, that's been around for
100 years.
yeah, over 100 years. People have been vacationing there. You have some property management companies that are pretty far behind the times. It's almost like they always just did their own marketing and website. Airbnb came along, so Airbnb was an add-on marketing tool. It wasn't
Mhm.
their primary. And a lot of times those property managers, they make their money. It's sort of like Amazon. They make it by scaling, by
Mhm.
having more and more properties. And for the long-term rentals that we own out of state, the more units they can have, the more profitable they're going to be. And initially, I went into co hosting with that mindset. Now, at the time, we were only managing, I think, one, maybe two properties, or we were onboarding our second property. And then, in addition to the ones we own, I'm super thankful that we got to have dinner with a influencer in the space. His name's Bill Faith, and he runs a mastermind, and he co-operates the STR Wealth Conference with Mike Shogren that Kim and I really enjoy going to. And Bill had a discussion with us about really selecting high quality homes and high quality owners, and really influenced us or encouraged us to have a smaller portfolio with much higher quality properties. And I'm so happy that that discussion happened early on in our co-hosting journey, because at the end of the day, a house that makes very little money, that could be riddled with problems and problem guests, depending on the location or the market, could take more work actually than a house that's making five, six, seven times the amount. And so, and on top of that, charging what we do and being very selective on the houses that we take on allows us to really bring like our full battery of experience and information and pour it into that property, right? Like we can pour it into that property. We can educate the owners. We can make sure things are done the right way. We can have the brain capacity or the mental capacity to pour ourselves into that property as if it was our own. And who benefits from it? The owners benefit from it, the guests benefit from it. And then at the bottom, we also benefit from it. So that was a huge sort of learning. I'm really, really happy that happened at the very beginning of our journey here, because what I'm starting to learn is it's much more impressive to a prospective client when I tell them how small our portfolio is, but the types of properties we take on. They're much more impressed by that than me just, if I were to arbitrarily have a lot more units, but then they're never going to hear from me again. So
Mm.
I was super happy that happened, because it's impossible for me not to approach a house as if it was my own once we sign on the dotted line to co-host. And nobody wants to have a problem property, right? It's just, and even if we don't own it, we still feel the responsibility of ownership in the home and the pride in making it perform well. And really each house is, we say this in a lot of our marketing materials, but each house is its own business. Our business is not just property management of houses. Each individual house is its own P&L at some level. And having that for me really helps me articulate, you know, especially when I have to say no to an owner, it helps me articulate why that conversation is happening in that way. So that was a neat thing I just didn't have on my radar in 2022.
It's interesting that you say that because I remember that conversation with Bill back in September. I've found that in my last two jobs that your bigger clients that pay you more, that are more savvy, take up less of your time and are just more smooth sailing. The smaller clients that don't pay a lot and are more noisy, just generally speaking, I know I'm generalizing here, but that happened at my last company that, and at this company as well. We have these big, whale of accounts, and then and you obviously handle that account management at a different caliber, but then you have these smaller, less savvy, I work for car gurus, the dealerships, and so you can spend a way more time on them, and you're making way less, money for those hours. So I feel like that's Bill's kind of business model there with, and he has the connections too for having people with these huge houses that can gross over 200 grand, which is great.
Yeah.
So we're learning a ton about, we've already been learning about beach markets for a while, but mountain houses, which have such a huge draw, huge potential, but I have a lot of challenges and quirks to overcome. And I said, it's really nice getting these battle wounds now because it makes me more confident to go into any market, or more savvy with what questions to ask. What's the well system? What's going on here? What's going on there? Because there's these things that we've learned the hard way from. And I had another point I was going to make and I forgot now.
It's okay. Yeah, so we're recording this. It's 10 at night. Our kids are asleep. I've had a half a bottle of wine, so we're rounding out 2022 with a little bit of a celebration here.
Oh, I remember now.
Let's hear it.
So I think that you've been working more directly with owners lately, but I think you've also learned some stuff, especially most recently in the last few weeks on this. And we had Julie George on this podcast a while ago, and a little while ago, and she had brought up a great point on when she is evaluating a potential owner to be part of her co-hosting portfolio. She said she'd point out something pretty minor that would need to be replaced and upgraded for short-term rental. Hey, that coffee pot's a little old. Let's get a new one. Or I tend to use drip coffee instead of Keurigs. We should upgrade that. And she would gauge the reaction of the owner to see how difficult they were fighting that particular recommendation or not. And there's these little subtleties that you notice, I think, with any interaction with people. But I think you've also had some gut reactions on people like, hey, I think this person would be a great fit for co-hosting, or I didn't get good vibes from this situation. And I think that, we're learning to trust that gut, and also read between the lines with certain interactions to see not just if they're a good, they're a good co-hosting client for us, but do they have the stomach for Airbnb in general with
Yeah,
their home?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is really interesting. Um, I want to circle back just sort of on the industry as a whole and kind of what we're seeing, at least in the markets that we operate in. What do you think? Do you think that, let's talk about revenue and occupancy. The burning question so many people want to know is the data I'm looking at historically, can that be applied to next year? What does that mean? And it's so market specific, right?
Mhm.
And there's ways to hedge against loss, but um I have some thoughts on this. I see it come up a lot, so I figured, do you have any thoughts on that too, or
Probably fewer than you do, but I'd say I have no concerns about the Cape and beach vacations. I think those have been very strong and steady for a very long time. They draw from all over the country. I remember being at a conference in Texas with someone from California saying, "Oh yeah, I'm renting in Chatham." She was saying instead of Chatham. So that's how I knew she definitely wasn't from the area. So I think that have no concerns. We've only seen steady growth and not turbulence there. So I'm not as worried there. For up here, I think you and I were even talking about this earlier tonight, is up in the mountains. I think that the recession's hitting people there, that it's also the winter, travel's a little tougher. This is a little bit further. Cape Cod's an hour from Boston. This is 3.5 hours from parts of Massachusetts. So you have those factors against you. You have weather challenges, and then you also have the cost. So renting a ski house, a ski pass at Sunday River, people typically have their own gear. Maybe they have to rent gear. So I think that some pockets in January we don't see or booking up, but it's also, this is our first time going through, we aren't even through a full calendar year here. So some people say, oh, they will get booked last minute if we see people see there's 4 inches of snowfall that came. So you might have someone, in their 20s that can take PTO much, on much shorter notice, popping up here and booking it. So we're kind of waiting and seeing and watching, but we do think, based on what we're hearing from other owners and co-hosts in the area, that there might be some that revenue with this year compared to last year would definitely be less. And I've heard that on podcasts with experts from Price Labs, et cetera, on that.
Right. And that's where you have to be careful when buying, like if you're buying a house that is going to cost, that same house is 20% more this year than it did last year, your revenue is not necessarily going to be 20% higher either. One thing that Kim and I really, really get interested in is not just the amenities that you can throw into a house, because at some point, right, you could deck out a house so nobody ever wants to leave, and that's great, but it's a lot cheaper to figure out what kind of local amenities are being implemented, right? And so one of the things that drew us to Sunday River is, I mean, first of all, it's 7 mountains, it's the biggest ski resort in New England. But now what continues to keep us intrigued and why we've been open to now we co-host up here as well, which wasn't really on our radar before, but why we've kind of really dug into this market is Boyne Resorts has bought Sunday River. They own Big Sky, and then I think it's nine or
It's 10.
10.
They have 10 total.
They have 10 mountains around the country. And not only that, with Sunday River, they bought a lot of land right next to it with future plans over, it'll take several decades, but with future plans of doubling the size of Sunday River. And so that would end up, assuming no other massive sort of growth things happen in the ski sort of industry, that would make Sunday River the biggest ski resort in the country by a long shot. It would end up being, probably when they're done, 14 or 15 mountains all connected to each other. You could do a different chairlift for every single run for an entire week. Those are things, of course, we are cash flow people. We buy for cash flow. It's why I like co-hosting. It is a pure cash flow game for
Mhm.
us. It is. But wealth is built through appreciation over a long period of time. Doesn't matter what your investment is. It could be gold, right? But it could be gold, it could be stocks. If you hold something smart for long enough, that's where wealth is brought. That's where wealth is made. So that's what really kind of keeps us in this market, even though it has those different challenges, is I know that Sunday River is not going anywhere. Those mountains aren't moving anytime soon, and it's something that I like. So, when I give recommendations or I give advice to people, I'm always telling them, look, like, do some really deep due diligence on what is happening in the area, what's bringing people there, and what will continue to bring people there to that area. And then, hop on a site like AirDNA and see what is my exact competition. You know what I mean? This house, Logan's Lodge, sleeps 10 people, and there's fewer houses that sleep 10 people compared to 8 people. So the houses that sleep 10 are going to make more than one that sleeps 6 or 8. So just different things like that are really going to help you work through that. And again, if you ever have any questions on what kind of due diligence to do, hit us up on Instagram. It's Menapace_real estate. And we're more than happy to at least share with you the types of things that we've learned from experience that help when it comes to due diligence.
And the thing I love about digging into this kind of business, until this is the stuff we want to spend more of our time on instead of dozens of hours in bookkeeping like I'm doing some days.
Or
Um,
guest
Guest
communication.
communication, exactly, or guest troubleshooting, I should say, is more of the challenge. But Bill Faith had pushed that a lot at the conference as well. But that there's, I don't want to keep beating this drum too much. But I'd say for Bethel, some things that were amazing to learn about was, yes, Boyne Resorts own Sunday River, and they bought Pleasant Mountain last year, which used to be called Shawnee Peak. My parents have a house there that they bought for, I don't know, 70 grand back 25 years ago. So I, was just slowly planting the seed saying, hey, we could help short-term rental it for you. Just let us know, because they're both retired and cash flow would be helpful there. So I was actually doing research to find out what they're doing with Pleasant Mountain, stumbled on a 2-hour podcast with the CEO of Boyne Resorts. And that's where we heard him talking about doubling the size of Sunday River over the next few years, or sorry, few decades. um, Not years, that'd be pretty crazy. What the plans are for Pleasant Mountain. Combine that with the train that is going to be going through from Boston to Montreal. Everyone, you hear these articles or headlines, and I think that paying attention and keeping an ear to that stuff's really important. So when I went and looked through those articles, I saw that train is supposed to stop in Old Orchard Beach. Another friend has has a place near there, coastal Maine, and then it stops in Bethel. So combine Sunday River expanding with increased access for people without cars. You have a pretty cool perfect storm brewing here. And I think we buy for the long term. We don't plan to sell in 2, 3, 7 years or whatever. We picture this has, maybe things will change and we won't find a house different that meets our needs in a different way or in a different location. But we do try to buy for the long term and picture us having it for decades, not just years. So it's very cool seeing all those things come together. And I want to spend more time finding those little insights and pockets of wisdom, and kind of piecing together and stitching together those stories, so you can see where things might really be kind of on fire in a few years when
Right.
those things all come together. That train, I think, is expected to be ready in 2024. Those things
Yeah.
always get delayed, but
Yeah.
that's sooner than I thought when I initially heard that headline.
Yeah. What and for our listeners, we had zero script or agenda in this discussion.
That a little bit.
We're just kind of going for it. But at the same time, it's neat, sort of just having an honest reflection of the year and then sharing it with everybody.
The one thing I forgot to add on that is regulation. We were talking
Yeah.
about this earlier too, where Bethel, Newry, those are the towns closest to Sunday River. They don't have a rental permitting system. They don't have, you said they can't employ even like a building inspector full time. They don't even have, they used to have their own police department, and then they got rid of it, and the Oxford County Police Department, 45 minutes away, services this area. So I'm not saying, oh, great, there's no regulation, swarm here. It's more, they're very far behind it. So we don't have concerns of that. We have breathing room for the foreseeable future, which is nice. Cape Cod's a pretty established rental permitting system, but we've avoided urban areas because of the regulations changing so quickly. And it's not something that we've thought about doing anytime in the near future. It's been more these vacation homes.
Well, and I think, like our ideal customer avatar is someone going on vacation, right?
Mhm.
Like we have some long-term rentals, and that's, covers the, basic living type of situation, right? But I love going. Do you like going on vacation?
Yes.
I love
Who
going on
doesn't?
vacation. You know what I mean? And I find that most of our guests love going on vacation as well. And being able to provide a platform for somebody to go on that vacation, and now getting to expand that by helping host other people's homes and providing more vacations, that makes me super happy. And I think that's why it's so easy for me to almost, treat somebody else's home as if it's ours, and just step right into those shoes and do what we do best, which is giving people vacation. So I don't know that we'll ever necessarily be in a market where it's not vacation primary. Maybe we will. You never know what's going to come up, but for right now, it's worked really well for us, in my opinion. What's something you are most proud of, or like you were happiest you attended, or like something that got you really excited that happened this year, that in January of 2022 you never thought would happen?
Oh, that's tough.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah. So of course it was really exciting, stepping out of my job as a W-2 and going into real estate full time. That was definitely a dream come true. Um, but I think that what got me really excited, and I also think was most important for our sort of handful of businesses that we run within real estate now, was both of us attending the Miami retreat.
Mm.
Now the Miami retreat was called STR Wealth Conference Miami. It was only 100 people. It was pretty expensive. Like they made sure you were someone that was going to be committed. That they definitely did that. It wasn't as casual as the Nashville conference that we go to, that was, probably a quarter the price. But that was really important because that was a trip that both Kim and I went to, and there was not a ton of couples there. There would be sort of one individual in the couple, and then their partner would sort of either be at the hotel or back at home. But what I definitely see, and I see this a lot both as a real estate agent and then more recently as sort of like a coach mentor, I see it a lot where both partners in a relationship are not, their goals aren't aligned in what they want to achieve in real estate. And they might be super supportive of one another and what their own individual goals are. But they're not so aligned that they're going to drop that kind of money for both of them to go learn for a week or a weekend, or I can't remember. But so that was really cool because I felt like making that investment, it got us to be able to make sure we were speaking the same language in this industry. It helped Kim and I take a step back and then really reflect on, well, what are our goals? Like, why are we doing this? Right? Because there's some really painful times, spending Christmas Eve on your phone for most of the day. And when you're a co-host, not only are you managing guests, but you're managing owners, right? Like an owner doesn't want to lose $2,500 out of nowhere because there's a cancellation due to no power, right? They look to us as the experts on how to navigate that situation. And as navigating it, we're navigating it with the guests, we're navigating it with the owners, and then multiply that over several houses. It can make for a really stressful day when it's supposed to be sort of family and fun and vacation for us, right? So, what keeps us going through those really hard days and those really hard times? And I think that that trip to Miami really allowed us to build clarity around what is it that we're trying to achieve, and with that, how can we support each other when there's these really, really challenging times in this industry? And I mean, like, really challenging. It can be really, really stressful. So I was super thankful that Bill and Mike put that on. If they provided again in a heartbeat, I think we would sign up for it. Um, so yeah, I really enjoyed going to that. I'm super thankful that like Kim and I have this relationship that we can work through those different things because our goals aren't always the same. We're two different people. Like it's normal, right? And a lot of times your business goals and your financial goals aren't necessarily in line with what your personal goals are, right? Like if I could have it my way, I'd work out for 3 days, 3 hours a day. I'd sleep a lot more and I wouldn't be on my phone all day on Christmas Eve, uh, helping support guests and owners. But when you have sort of a strong enough why, and then you have somebody else that you're kind of going through the trenches with, it makes it worth it. So that was the biggest aha for me, for sure.
I'd say for the conference that we went to, it started the conversation on a different trajectory. It wasn't like we went there
Yeah.
on Monday, came out Wednesday, totally transformed. I think
Right.
it helped really steer us in the right direction. And um, some things that I'm happy and proud of is, yes, the conference was awesome. I think that the content that we share with each other, discover, learn from, use that to apply to ourselves, whether it's mindset, whether it's, more tactical. I think that's been very cool. Like we both read Who Not How this year, The Gap and the
Yes.
Gain. Consuming all that content at the conference was also really helpful. So I think that's, even in switching gears, not just about business and real estate, but even parenting. I think we have
Yeah.
a 3.5-year-old. And anyone who has a toddler knows that there's challenges, big feelings. He's a very energetic kid too. So
Kim's describing me.
so I think that um we have to shift gears at times and find content and things to help us support our toddler and us be on the same page about that and parenting. Because then we will have different styles, and even if we know the way we're trying to do it, we get frustrated under pressure and fatigue and slip from our ideal state of how we parent. So I think that's been very cool. I think that it's been helpful, in this area, but just in general, because that that connection of syncing on, content and discussing it and figuring out, oh, I really liked that. Or, oh, I think one morning we were in a really negative headspace on, oh, this isn't going right. This isn't going right. This isn't going right. And then I just started reading The Gap and the Gain that morning. And I text Dave, I said, oh my God, we should be in the gain, not the gap. And you had already read it months
Yeah.
ago. And you said, oh, you're absolutely right. Wow. So I said, it's almost one of those books I need to reread every few months to get my mind straight on things. So I think that was very cool this year. And then the other one I forgot to mention is the hospitable host. I've
Yes.
always wanted to write and be published in a book. And obviously we're one chapter of many chapters in that book that is, so it still feels not real to me that it's coming out in March, and there's a launch party at the Nashville conference in March of 2023. But I think that was something very cool. It was a whirlwind. I think that we only have 3,000 words in the chapter. We tag team writing it over a couple of weeks and sent it off to editing, and it's there now. So, we're holding our breath, seeing what the edits come back as. But yeah, I feel like I'll need to be pinched if and when it does come out, and I'm actually holding it with our family photos and our words in there. So that was a very cool,
Yeah.
unexpected thing of 2022. I was gonna say 2023, jumping the gun on the year.
Well, in the genesis of Hospitable Host, had I not gone to Nashville, had Kim and I not gone to Miami, and had I not seen really strong networking opportunities, that and our opportunity to contribute to that probably would have never surfaced. Like it would have never, I wouldn't have even known the person that was
Recruiting for it.
recruiting for it. And so and that was Julie George. She was on episode 16 with us. So um again, it just sort of feeds into like if you're going to be in the space and you want to grow, then like lean in, be in it, make those investments, get yourself to those conferences, talk to people, take 100% advantage of being in that space because you have no idea where that'll lead. And it was really funny for Kim and I have known each other we've been dating we've been together for 10
10
years.
years. You're
We,
still dating when you're
yeah,
married 5 years.
yeah,
It's fine.
yeah. Yeah, right. We are married. Thank you for reminding me. And um, but Kim has always wanted to write a book, and this sort of fell in our lap as just this amazing opportunity to contribute our story. We love, as a real estate agent, and then just on sort of the mentorship and consulting front, we love helping people like get over that hump of buying their first short-term rental. And a lot of folks that we help buy, it's not necessarily a 100% investment property play. It's usually some sort of balance between vacation home and then short-term renting around that to cover their expenses or maybe make, a little bit of money. But this was just a really neat opportunity that we could branch out and then really expand our mission of helping people achieve their goals in that. So yeah, that was really cool. And it's funny, we're so busy. We are always so busy that we don't have a lot of time often to sort of sit back and reflect. It can almost feel like, okay, cool. Yep, got the chapter done. Okay, now, yep, okay, we're working on the website. Okay, we're backed up on accounting. Yeah. All right, Dave's got to get that contract out to these. Okay, there's showings today. It can kind of get lost in the shuffle, but I think that was a really big goal that we got to achieve this year.
It
That
doesn't feel real yet. I
it
wouldn't
doesn't, it does not feel real yet, and the people that we've started meeting, the others that are contributing to this book are all really amazing, so I think the final name of the book will be Hospitable Host Volume 2, but that'll end up getting published in middle of March, and that'll be really exciting. So maybe while we're on the topic of books, what are a couple of your favorite books from this year that you read?
I think I already named some of them. So
Yeah, yeah, I'll take a swing then. I think that Gap in the Gain was super helpful. So in 2021, that year I went on a tear reading like very specific and technical real estate books.
Mhm.
Most of them are all books that have been published by Bigger Pockets. So you can just go to biggerpockets.com and take a look on their online bookstore. If it's on there, I've read at least like half of them. But this was a much bigger year when it came to mindset and business and growth on that front. So it was like, okay, how do I do an out of state burr? How do we get better at running our short term rental? What are the sort of technical things? That was 2021. This year was about how do you overcome all the different challenges and how do you navigate working with people and how do you just live in this industry and be successful, and a lot of those books are not real estate specific books. So Gap in the Gain was a massive one, and that one really talked about how to rather than always looking at your progress as a failure from achieving your goal, if you haven't achieved your goal, it's to look at your progress as a gain based on where you comparing it to your starting point. So that was a really, really good one. Who Not How by the same exact author, again, an amazing, amazing book. And I think that that is really a foundation for why we're hiring an assistant and going through that and expanding and figuring out how can we leverage different people and support different people in their own goals, but also making it so we're achieving our goals, because it did not take us long in this industry to get totally maxed out. Kim works at a really successful company and has a really successful career path in that space. I'm on my own sort of company career path situation, but once we, I think, cross that threshold of managing probably 4 houses with our two and then two others before we even like then have since then taken on more, it became very, very clear that we were totally flat out. And we really had to start thinking of ways to leverage technology to automate more things, uh, better leverage our time, right? We could plan on waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and working on things, or plan on sitting down at 8 o'clock at night and working on stuff. But our kids have different plans for us and we have to make sure that we're there for them. So I think that the who not how was really good for us. Before we started counting our chips and counting things as income, we started looking at it as, okay, once we reach this income threshold, that's going to be able to cover this salary. And we never really started taking that money for ourselves. We just sort of looked at it as this is going to be invested elsewhere to help us then further grow, because our goal is not to make the most money ever in this industry. Our goal is to get time back and be able to just make enough money to support ourselves and live comfortably as we have been for the last, 10 years or
Vacation
so,
homes we love.
with vacation homes that we love. So um I think those two books were really important. I that and this is going to sound really funny, but I would say Good Inside was a really good one. So Good Inside, this is really funny. This
By
is
Dr. Becky Kennedy.
by Dr. Becky Kennedy. This is a book that really talks about how to navigate the world of having, a toddler.
Relationships in general, I'd say relationships and communication.
Yes, exactly. It's uh how yeah, it is the ultimate book on how to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, in my opinion, whether they're a toddler or they're a client. It's a book for parenting, but if you just read it and you take a step back, especially for people that are in sort of the same life space as us, mid 30s, have young kids, working really hard. I found that to be really helpful because the principles that I've learned in that book, I've definitely applied to clients, both on the sales side as well as the co hosting side. I've applied it to guests, I've applied it to so many different things, and I found it to be really helpful. So, those are three of my top books. And I'm also looking forward to listening to Rich Dad Poor Dad probably for like the seventh time, but it's something I like to do every January, and looking forward to starting that next week.
I'd say Who Not How and The Gap in the Gain were hands down the best books I read this year. And I read a lot of those types of books, those mindset, leadership, success category. And those two blew me away. I think that especially Who Not How, you hit on one of the key points there. And another key point they had in the book was make your goals so big that you have to ask you, who do you need in your team to achieve
Yeah.
them? And I think that that didn't click as much for me earlier in the year as it does now when I think
Right.
about how we're growing our team and always thinking about, okay, what's our next goal? What are we trying to achieve and who do we need to get there and when can we hire them? Because I think we were just DIY for the last 3 years. So that was those two surpass all the other. I was just flipping through the rest of the books that I read this year, and I think those were phenomenal. I also like Ed Milet's podcast. So he has The Power of One More. That book came out too, and I thought that was a good book. But the Dan Sullivan books, hands down, are the best ones I've read this year.
You know, two others that sort of go with that. They're both Grant Cardone books,
Mhm.
10X and Be Obsessed. So, the 10, well, let's start with 10X real quick because it just plays off something about making your goals so big that you need help achieving them. You know, when somebody asks me, like, what's that number per month? I just say $1 million a month. And I say, like, why not? You know what I mean? How are we going to achieve that? Well, I'm sure we could build a strategic roadmap to eventually get there, but I'm okay not reaching that goal if we fall short by 70%. And I don't make that goal thinking I'm going to fall that far short. But I also think that when you can just take a second to break out of typical thinking of what you think you deserve or don't deserve, or what you think is normal and not normal, and you just get down to brass tacks of what is it that you want, and don't be scared to just say what it is that you want, like, there it is, you know what I mean? And I think that one thing that Grant Cardone does really well in that book is he says, it's okay to want more. You know what I mean? This is not uh, we don't live in a country where everybody has the same,
Mhm.
and some people are dealt a bad hand, but there is a close correlation to how hard you work towards something and how much you sacrifice to achieve it, and what you can achieve on the other side. And as you're on your journey of achieving those things, when you put yourself in the space of other people that's sort of that are trying to achieve the same thing, I feel like that's when magic really happens. So 10x, I thought that was just an amazing book. Grant Cardone's a little quirky, right? I like to listen to his books. He reads it and he narrates it himself. So if you don't like him as a person, I would suggest just reading it instead of hearing him sort of banter on in the book. But it is a good one. And the other one of Be Obsessed, it really supports that. It's how do you get 10x, right? It's about being obsessed with something. And I think there's a fine line. I know a lot of people that can be so obsessed that everything else in their life fails because they're so obsessed. And you really have to think like, are you achieving your goal then if everything else has failed? But a lot of people look at us and they're like, you guys are nuts. You guys sacrifice a lot. You like
Or that sounds like a lot of work. I don't
that
wanna do
sounds
that.
like a lot of work. Yeah. Like, I mean, we hear that so much. Oh my gosh, that sounds like a lot of work. Yeah, it is. It is a lot of work, but, it's funny. I was out to dinner with a friend recently. And so I'm 34. I'm 34 and a half years old. I said, I want to be fully retired by 40. And I caught some flack at that dinner for saying that. And it was almost like people kind of felt like I didn't deserve that, or like, what are you crazy? Why would you
What would you
ever?
do with your
Yeah,
time?
what would you do with your time? Right. I was like, oh my gosh, I could think of a million things that I do with my time. Um, and he said, well, I wanna retire a normal retire age. So he said, and like I'd love to, make 15 bucks an hour working at a golf course and get free golf and maybe do that like 15 hours a week. That'd be pretty nice. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to just own that golf course and get free golf, and that's where that ends. And you could work for me. But that's what I want. And I'm not like scared about that. I don't think there's any problems with wanting to have those things. And, Ed Milet like shares this theory, Grant Cardone, you name it, anyone that is really successful, especially those that touch real estate, it's wanting to have those things so usually it's to buy more time back so you can spend it with your family and relax and have a better quality of life. But those were two more books that I read that really resonated with me because it took me very far outside my comfort zone of what I thought was normal and what I thought I could have. And listening and really synthesizing those books really gave me the confidence also to leave my W-2. That was when I saw, okay, yes, my floor for working for myself, my revenue floor is much lower. It could be zero. Actually, it could be negative. um, but my ceiling is so much higher.
Mhm.
And if I'm sitting here working to make somebody else rich for the rest of my life, then I can enjoy a nice, comfortable 3.5% raise each year, no matter how hard I work. Or I can have my time tied to a dollar. And not only that, but I can start bringing value to a lot more people, a lot more customers of mine in a space that I'm a lot more passionate about. And I can help them start to make a lot of money too, which that was all part of my why. So
And say not just on vacation rentals and Airbnb and co-hosting, but especially on the just the agent side too. You said I have goals here. I want to have a team, and there's this. Some people double down on just co-hosting, but I think you still have more room to grow and things that you want to accomplish with the agent stuff too, which applies to that.
100%,
So
100%. I mean, yeah, like I love that there's not a ton of people doing what I'm doing in Massachusetts. And I think that, for me, just to share a little bit about what my goals are as an agent, I love that we live sort of in this pocket of Massachusetts called the Metro West. And I do have a lot of clients that are starting to think about buying their, say, retirement home in Cape Cod, but they're not ready to move out of their primary home yet. And I can help them do that safely. And that's how I market myself. Um, like I just love that, right? And I get so much satisfaction. Also, we have a lot of friends that they are first time home buyers. I get so much satisfaction helping somebody buy their home. Like they've been just like through the trenches the last 2 years trying to buy a home. And finally, we have opportunities available to us now with just a less tight market. So that's something that like I get really jacked up about, is helping somebody to buy their first home. So it's pretty cool. Well, we've been going at it for a while here. Why don't we start to round this one out? So Kim, what are, some of your goals for 2023?
My goals for 2023 are to basically ask myself, for any mechanical task I do, how do I delegate this appropriately so that I don't do that so that we can
Right.
augment ourselves and where we can add the most value to our businesses. I think that's what I'm most excited about. I think hitting the ground running with a virtual assistant, virtual professional is actually what our firm calls them, the one that helps us hire them. So my success is no longer how much I can accomplish, it's how well I can train and augment that person. That's a huge shift in management. So I'm excited about that. And I think, trying to take a step back and question every single thing I do and see, am I the who that should be doing it?
Yeah.
And so I think that I'm excited to level up in that sense. So that's probably personally what I'm so excited about, and has a ripple effect, obviously, in the businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, goals for us, I'd like to bring on a few more co-hosts, but we actually have several in the pipeline right now that are very high quality owners, people, and have high quality houses. So I want to like onboard those and then see where we're at with a capacity standpoint. And if it feels right, we'll take on more clients that way. Um, I'd love to help as well. Like we've started getting some traction in like the coaching and mentorship space. And I think it would be a lot of fun to help, you know, 3 or 4 new either owners or people that are looking to own and be in this space, like helping them get up and running and on the right path, not through us as a co-host, but through us as like a coach mentor, like something in that realm. Because that, I know for me, when I'm up at night writing emails and doing analysis for people, I really enjoy that. So, and I just get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing more people get into this industry and really leverage it to achieve their own financial goals and success. So, I think that that is the biggest goal, and the rest are more sort of like technical, as being a real estate agent and growing my team there, like ones that you'd expect from somebody who wants to grow. But I think those are, you know, the coaching mentorship for me is really important. And it's definitely not something I saw myself doing. But at the same time, we have been in this industry now for close to 5 years. We've definitely put in our 10,000 hours, you know what I mean? And so I'm ready to really take that and share it with people so they can leverage it and sort of fast track their journey.
And I will say, we attack the knowledge sharing, learning, consulting, coaching with humility. We recognize that we still have a lot to learn ourselves and are constantly investing in ourselves, obviously, as we've talked
Yeah.
most of this podcast about that. So I'd say that there's still, but there are people who are at step one. And so it's exciting to be able to help them, because we were there a few years ago,
Yeah.
but still acknowledge that um, there's a lot more we want to accomplish and we will learn along the way. We can learn from people several steps ahead of us, but also our path will be different and we'll have different learnings from them that we can share with people. So,
Yeah.
but always approaching it with humility, I think is important and something we're trying to be mindful of.
Yeah. And then how about this podcast? Like, yeah, we launched a podcast this year.
Forget about that.
This is episode 19, and we actually already have 20 is recorded and it'll be released in the first week of the new year. So this is one of those ways that we help educate people is through this podcast. So thank you anyways. Thank you everyone that has been a listener, anyone that's listening to this now. To us, it was really important to get this out before the end of 2022. As people start to really gear up for what 2023 is going to look like, I think there's going to be tons of opportunities in different markets. Not every market, but I think that there's going to be tons of opportunities, at least in the markets that we operate in. And if you ever want to get in touch with us, just take a look at the show notes. Our contact information will be there. You can reach out to Kim or myself directly, but we're in this space. We love this space. For us, it's been a really exciting ride the last 5 years, and I'm super excited. Because I didn't expect anything of what 2022 brought, and I'm very happy with how everything played out. I don't even know what to expect for next year other than continuing to put one foot in front of the other. So,
But
well,
with that, we've taken up enough time.
with that, take care, everyone. Have a happy and healthy New Year's, and we'll see you in 2023. The 5-Star Co-Host is at the vanguard of the short-term rental industry by leveraging technology and systems to maximize the guest experience while achieving high revenue for owners. Get a free home analysis by emailing the 5-Star Co-Host at gmail.com. That's the 5-Star Co-Host at gmail.com. THEFIVESTARCOHOST at gmail.com. Thanks, and I hope you enjoyed the show.